off with, okay, got it. Thanks for doing that, Nate. We're going to start off with Jenny Jancy. And Jenny, what I want you to do is I'm going to have you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your own journey along the entrepreneurial path, the translational path. And then in the second half, James Huey, who's a partner at Wilson Sonsini, which is one of the key law firms that startup companies utilize in the Bay Area. He's going to talk about the legal aspects of company formation involving, governance and agreements and intellectual property, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So we're really lucky that we have James joining us. And I know that both Jenny and James hope to address questions that you have. And so what you can do is you can flash your hand or just speak out, or you can type them in the chat. Is it the chat or the Q&A? You can type them in the chat. Yeah, Nate's shaking his head up and down, so that's a good sign. You type them in the chat, and Nate's going to monitor them, and he'll signal you to give your question. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Jenny Jancy.
All right. Thanks, Charles. Yep, I am Jenny Jancy. I am Program Director at Catalyst for the Diagnostics, Digital Health, and Biotools tracks. I'm also the Campus Director of the UCSF Launchpad, which is a program to support and promote entrepreneurship in our student postdoc trainee population. So I'm going to, well, I guess I can give a little bit of my own background. I started in the startup biotech space and went back and got my PhD at UC Berkeley in molecular and cell biology. So I'm a scientist by training. From there I knew that, I wanted to go back into industry and to work for small companies and be very nimble and vibrant community. So I've done that in various capacities. And then as of 3 years ago, I came to UCSF, kind of mirroring these, how things do get from academia to industry. And so what it means to be, to do this entrepreneurship space. So that being said, let me share my screen. What I wanted to talk about today, actually, hold on, let me change that. You guys have all been doing such great work this summer already, putting these target product profiles together and really going through all the different fields and things that need to be, thought about when trying to form a successful product. So there's some other parallel activities that you can do as well to, make sure that this is moving in the right direction. And one of these is the overarching thing is to really have this entrepreneurial mindset. We typically use a lean launchpad approach. It's kind of the trendy word right now, but we're going to go over what that means to kind of help the success of a venture, to make sure it's a good, valid business plan. But this type of mindset is really beneficial for anything you choose to do, and any sort of career in any company, even dealing with clients, etc. Let's see if I can get those. So the agenda for today is we're going to be talking about customer discovery first. It's really the core of the lean approach. You may have a brilliant idea, but is this business going to work? Excuse me. And then and it's the work, the TDP, the customer discovery, and trying to put together a business plan. You're going to need to sell it, bring people along, and understand why they would want your product. And founders of companies will tell you that they have given their pitch millions of times to different investors, partners, potential licensees, etc. So we'll go about what goes into a pitch deck. And then lastly, I'm going to talk about just resources that are available. If you're interested in taking any of this stuff further in entrepreneurship, we have a vibrant community at UCSF and beyond that are here willing to support. So lots of resources are available to everyone. So again, UCSF has like amazing, brilliant research. So quality, everyone, all the PIs and faculty here are really working towards the betterment of health and in society, and just really solid foundation of research. But that doesn't always translate to getting it out for patient benefit. So for instance, I'm going to give an example of a Catalyst awardee we had a few years ago. And he had a technology that would reduce the number of CT scans in children. And this will save so many kids from developing cancer. If you get a CT scan when you're a child, 1 in 200 of those will develop cancer because of that scan. So of course, eventually that would save the healthcare system tons of money, so they wouldn't have to treat the cancer. But then of course, it just personally, societal benefit to not have these children exposed to such high radiation. So of course, people will want it, right? So he came to Catalyst and was like, got the help of the advisors, helped me bring this to market. However, he went through, him and his team went through that whole target product profile work, and that was really enlightening. To look at the different market and kind of landscape. And at the end of it, the advisors weren't actually sure how this becomes a viable product. So they were like, not sure if it's a big enough market for that specific pediatric diagnostic specific field he was going after. And really, why would the hospital pay for this? They already have something that works, and they're not going to recognize that societal benefit right away. So luckily for him, he was, again, being part of Catalyst and going through this TPP work, he was enlightened early on. He's not trying to, he's not out there raising money yet. He's not, selling this product, trying to sell this product to people. But there's plenty of examples out there where people aren't so lucky and don't do the important work ahead of time. I think a huge example that happened last year was this company called Proteus, digital health company that was valued at one point at $1.5 billion. They literally raised $500 million from investors. And then once their product hit the market, no one wanted to buy it. So they ended up going bankrupt. So they had a smart pill that they could put onto a therapeutic, and it would literally track that the patient took their pill or not. So it was, yes, of course, they're trying to get at the problem of adherence and, compliance of taking your medication, but really, like, are they sure, like, who wants to take this? Does your grandmother, does she trust taking a pill that's going to be tracked through her body? And then the question is, who wants to pay for this? Because they would take an existing therapeutic, put this technology on, and it costs twice as much. The insurance companies were like, I'm not paying for that. I'm just going to pay for the regular therapeutic. And I think the final kicker for me, which is interesting, is, you have to think about what your beachhead, what your initial customer is for a product too. And I do not think that they thought this one through. Their first product was an antipsychotic based for schizophrenic patients. And while that may be a big problem to have, maybe not adherence to the therapeutics, and they need to increase that. One psychiatrist mentioned, she's like, the last people that would want to, her schizophrenic patients are literally already nervous and have anxiety about people following them and tracking them. So this is the last type of product that they would want to take. So again, if they had done this work beforehand, they would have tried to realize that this was not going to be something that was going to be sold. So what should they have done? What should our Catalyst awardees, what should everyone go through in order to make sure that they're making the right product? And the answer to this is customer discovery. And really, what customer discovery is talking to people and figure out what problem you are trying to solve. So your technology and your solution and your research is not the first important part. What you really need to do is talk to people out there and figure out where their pain points are in their life or in their jobs, in their daily lives, in their careers. So who should you talk to? So this is another thing where you need to consider the whole ecosystem of what a customer means. So of course you have the end users that are using it, but especially in healthcare, there can be so many different stakeholders throughout this process. So important is the end user, but maybe even more important is who's paying for this. You need to make sure that they would be willing to pay for it because they see there's going to be value coming back to them. Of course, there's other people that, that could recommend that, a hospital purchase a certain technology because this would really, help them do their jobs better. So there's people all over, especially the healthcare ecosystem, that you would need to discuss with to see where their pain points are. So what you need to do is ask these people about their problems though. Again, we're going to try to validate the problem first and don't talk about your solution. So you want to ask open-ended questions and hear about their daily lives. The last thing you want to do is ask them a question that they're just going to give you the wrong answer to. Like if you ask, hey, you're going to use this product, would this be beneficial to their, they're going to give you the answer you want to hear and be like, oh yeah, that sounds cool. So that's not worthwhile whatsoever. Because the reality is are they going to buy it? Are they going to pay for this? Is it really going to alleviate some pain that they're feeling? So talk about their life, even if they're going down routes that seem completely irrelevant to which you may be looking at. You might find little snippets of info that could really help you pivot your own technology to help solve different problems. But so start broad, and then you can always dive deeper. Like, tell me a specific example of, what happened the last time you were trying to decide whether to give a child a CT scan or not? What went through your head? So you can dive deeper and get at specifics, but really talk about their daily lives and not your product. So going back to my example, so this PI went through this process and talked to a wide variety of people. And he realized that the real pain point of the buyer of this technology was something completely unrelated. And he heard it over and over again and was like, oh, okay, wow, like this is a significant problem. It's more about hospital operations, and how they operate on the back end. And it's like a huge money loss for the hospitals of trying to deal with a certain problem. Of course, I'm not giving too specific examples because that is a confidential Catalyst program project, but he realized he was able to use his technology to help the hospitals operate more efficiently. So literally his existing technology can be used to help their pain points. I mean, you never thought of that before. Meanwhile, if they did adopt this as a new product, they would also, use it and it would still help reduce CT scans in children. So literally his initial want of, and what's driving him to create this product still gets to be realized. So once you've done, this customer discovery experience, or maybe more in conjunction with this, is to try to put together a business model canvas. And it's this one-page tool where you can, put together all the certain resources and relationships and financials all on one page. So it used to be that people would make, lengthy business plans, like 30 to 50 pages of detailing out exactly what their product is, how they're going to develop it, who they're partnering with, huge financial spreadsheets of how this is going to be such a viable thing. And then the first time that they go out and hear from a customer that that's not exactly what they want, they have a hard time throwing that away, because it's like they worked so hard on getting that business plan that, it's a really hard thing to change. Versus if they had just done it more like post-it note style, one page, here's what we think, here's our assumptions we're making. That's easier to change. So here's an example of the business canvas model. And again, kind of what I was just saying is you make these hypotheses, you fill this out, and then you test this with customers. Inevitably, you will invalidate your assumptions, because something, whether it's a huge thing that you got wrong or just, need a little bit of tweaking, you can iterate again, change this up, hypothesize, and retest it quite easily. Going back to customer discovery work, it really all starts with the customer and what their problem is. So you'll see there's a certain order to fill out this business model canvas. And 1 and 2 are kind of interconnected right here. So you have your different customer segments, your user, your buyer, who makes the decisions, who's paying for it, all of these different customer segments over on the right here. And for each of those customer segments, you need to figure out what the value is for them and what the specific value is that they will gain if they use your product. The rest of this, I'm not going to go through this in detail, but you can see on the right-hand side, numbers 1 through 5, all kind of have to do with the customer and that's what you need to focus on first. The customer, what your product gives them, and how your relationship is with them, and of course, what money you're getting from them in exchange. On the left-hand side is more of the things you need to think about to develop your product. So resources, partners, activities, and then of course, what the cost is to develop that product. So, and hopefully your revenue streams will be more than your cost structure and you can be a viable company. So again, I'm going through this quickly, broad overview, but in general, these are the types of activities that you need to think about along with all the fields and in conjunction with all the fields of the TPP. And then inevitably, you're going to want to either to sell your idea. So whether you need to sell your idea to investors or you're trying to find strategic partners or whatnot. And in order to do that, it's a great idea to put together a pitch deck. So, because what about all the work for that TPP? There's so much valuable information and there's so much value to the PIs on describing what that successful product looks like, right? Because we've been talking this whole time about the TPP is really what the product is, like with the end goal in mind. So this is what the product is, but now in order to communicate this to a broader audience, perhaps a non-scientific audience, is also an important aspect of forming your venture. So what goes into the pitch deck? Again, you have this target product profile work that we've done, do some customer discovery, and then also put together the analysis and tested and iterated and pivoted with the help of the business model canvas. And now you feel like you have a viable business plan. So that becomes your pitch deck. And what is the goal? What's the goal of the pitch deck? And it's really, you're convincing someone that there's a problem to be solved. And not only is there a problem to be solved, but it's a big problem that people really care about. Then you're trying to convince them that your team and your solution are the best way to solve this problem. And then also along the way, you'll hopefully make a significant amount of money and there's a return on investment that they'd be making. So here's a typical pitch deck format. Of course, companies can adjust as necessary what makes sense for their story. But these are the types of things that you want to kind of include in telling that story. And I'll just try to go through this fairly briefly. Have an example here. I think there might be someone on this call that worked on this project and went through our Health Tech Startup Week recently. But these are the winners of our Health Tech Startup Week, Ketoscope. But here's their logo. Here's the logo and a quick blurb on what they do. So it's really important to kind of start these with a hook and, to know your audience of who you're talking to, but, hook them in with a story or an emotion or something like that. You can talk about, something that's surprising, or like, I didn't realize that was a big problem. Or you can, talk about something that's like, oh, of course, this is a problem, that like something, really draws them in and gets them to understand. It's very important to use images usually at this point. For instance, I saw this image at that unsplash.com. I just saw this and I thought, oh, this kind of reminds me of being a student. And I was like, this could be, this is, so-and-so, she's a UCSF medical student. and is obviously having a hard time studying and concentrating on her studies. Turns out she's been really stressed out and has had a lot of work, and because of that she's developed insomnia, and this is obviously not helping and continues to spiral down her stress and not being able to study as much as she wants. And it turns out 1 in 4 medical students develops a bout of insomnia at some point, and therefore we have a solution to this problem. So basically, something like that, some sort of story to hook them in. Next, you can talk about your problem. You can have the statistics about the problem, and you can also have any information that you gain from your customer discovery work. Real quotes, real data, kind of showing, wow, this is such a big problem. So next, leading into that would be, your business opportunity. I know a lot of you on your TPP work have been looking at the TAM, SAM, and SOM already of the product and project you're working on. So this is, a great place to put this in. And I think what's important here, what you like to see, is to have this SOM, the serviceable, obtainable market. You like to be like, you're somewhat conservative. You're not going out and, going to create, you're not going to get the whole market share right off the bat. But so be conservative, but yet still show that when you are conservative, that is still a really significant amount of profit that you could be making. Oh, there we go. So next, you can finally talk about your solution. It's always good to have pictures or explain what the technology is, but brief and succinct. It's also a good place to talk about where it is currently in development versus where you plan to be. Of course, target market is important, especially things that you've learned from customer discovery. It's really important to show that you understand the difference between your users and your payers and and all your various customer segments, and and perhaps what your beachhead market is and why you'd be going after that one. Of course, competitive landscape also looked at in the TPP. Comparison charts or position maps are useful because you can show what your product is and what benefit it has over others. And so really focus on what the benefits that you have over the current standards of care or other people, other competing technologies that could be in development as well. Next, you talk about revenue. This can be pretty basic, simple economics. I think key here is that usually you try to borrow assumptions from other competitors, but just trying to be realistic about it and show yet still realistic, conservative, but show that it's significant. A go-to-market strategy, again, who are your first customers and how you plan to expand. So showing that really there is even a larger market out there for your product. And lastly, it's your team, and hopefully some compelling closing about how your product is going to be awesome. And so, but why your team? Your team is most important to a lot of stakeholders usually, because people know that technologies can often be solved and and achieved, and you probably already have some good proof of concept data of that. But it's really your team's background and their drive and willingness to execute this plan that is key to bringing a successful product forward. So I'll stop there. I don't know if there's been any questions in the chat or anything, but if anyone has any questions before I kind of shift gears to entrepreneurial resources. Again, sorry, broad overview. There's, as I'm going to show you, there's lots of different resources to go a little bit more in depth in these types of concepts.
I don't see any questions in the chat yet, Jenny, but one question that I'll pose to you that we've had from a bunch of people that may be on people's minds is, say I'm working on a project and I'm not ready to disclose the idea for this project yet. And I'm kind of worried about the IP. And if I start talking to customers, then other people might get my idea and steal my idea. What would you say to somebody like me in that scenario?
Yeah, Well, that's, I have to speak out of two sides, my mouth here a little bit, because we do get that question a lot, especially coming from UCSF, where, and IP is so important. So to start, I would say, do disclose this. If you have something, that you've been working on as part of your studies at UCSF or at, a different university, go to your tech transfer office. In our case, it's OTMA, Office of Technology Management, and disclose your invention, and they can help you with this whole IP and protecting your IP. That being said, I'm gonna go on the entrepreneurship side, is that it never happens. Like, it really rarely happens that someone steals your idea. And you don't need to put, super confidential information in these pitch decks. You can keep a lot of your scientific, know-how a secret within these pitch decks. But what's really important is to be talking to people. And so, don't disclose the very specific confidential details, but you should be talking to people about, what their problems are, what your potential solution is in broad terms, and, and show that you've been thinking about this market in general. Because very rarely does someone go, you've already been working a ton probably on this before, at the point where you finally get to a pitch deck. And very rarely does someone go, oh, that's cool, I'm gonna just do that instead. Like, it's a lot of work. And so people aren't really, that I've been told, and I haven't seen it, but it just rarely happens. I don't know, Nate, if you have anything you wanted to add to that.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. From all the questions that we've fielded that way, and we've asked experts, I couldn't agree more. I mean, if somebody has this idea, the more you talk to people, go to pitch competitions, talk to potential customers, talk to potential payers, buyers, users, all of that will only inform the idea more and be to your benefit. The odds of somebody taking that idea and being as passionate and dedicated to the idea as you are very, very, very minimal. So we encourage the opportunity for these ideas to really get kind of tested as early and as often as possible.
Yep. Yeah, thanks. Sorry, and someone has their hand up. I can't see my names for some reason when I'm sharing, but go ahead and ask your question.
Yes. Hi, nice to meet you. My name is John Merritt. Thank you so much for giving this talk. My question is, oftentimes, like, when you're doing customer research, you're doing market research, you're trying to get in touch with your customers and seeing how to make a great product for them. It's sometimes not possible to get in touch with customers. Like, they could be patients in a hospital, so you can't just go into a hospital and start talking to patients. Or oftentimes they could be like business clients that you a B2B business, but you can't really get a meeting with the business, and or maybe the topic or the product you're trying to make is on a sensitive issue where people don't want to really talk about it. How do you break that barrier?
Sure. I mean, I think there's various resources out there. There's various ways that you can reach people. Like, if you're talking about patients, for instance, like, there's a million Facebook groups for a million different, ideas out there. And lots of them are, different patient, like cancer patient groups, maybe specific cancer patient groups. And you can really, usually these people are pretty passionate about talking about things. And so I've heard of a lot of people, reaching patients in that respect. As far as, other businesses, it really starts with, I mean, again, if you know people are great. But honestly, like, LinkedIn is a great resource to just, search for who you're looking for. And, typically, don't go for the CEO and don't go for the data analyst, go for somewhere in between. The people that know kind of both sides and are willing to talk. And really, I think that a lot of people, if you send them an email or follow up with a call and say, oh, you guys are doing such great work on this, I'd love to hear more about, you're the expert in this field. Are you willing to give me 15 minutes of your time? Lots of people say yes. It'll actually probably turn out to be more like 45 minutes if you get talking, especially people like to talk about themselves. So if you're doing this right, they'll talk a lot. There's another example, but other places to find the people would be, you know, different trade shows. It really shows who the experts are of these field, or, you know, trade shows or conferences, that type of thing. Look who's speaking at those conferences. They often are already speaking about what they're doing, and so would love to speak about it more. Those are great resources as well. Is there a customer segment that I missed? Sorry.
No, that's perfect. Yeah,
Okay.
I think those are
Yeah,
really
I
great
mean, being
ways.
creative. Yeah, being creative and where to find those customers. Of course, it's always best to talk to people one-on-one, but sometimes, you know, if you need to do, like, you know, quick little survey monkey type things for a large, massive Facebook group or something like that could work too. But yeah, in general, it's usually it's also easy to figure out people's like work email addresses. They tend to be pretty standard across a company and stuff like that. So you try to figure it out, and just cold email, maybe follow up the next day with a cold call if you know their number.
Yeah, it's my brother actually used to work in sales all the time in biotech, and like his boss would always tell him every day to like hit the phones, you know, like call people and sell. So it's like it's pretty brutal. It's one of his first jobs out of college, but like, yeah, it's kind of like that.
It's a good skill to get used to, though. I mean, I think that the one thing that I've learned about entrepreneurship in general is that, you know, it's not the easiest thing, but the people that want it, they hustle and figure it out. And, you know, lots of people don't come with this background, and people are really, you know, making successful companies, you know, left and right from not knowing what they're doing when they start, and just hustling and working to figure it out. So. Thanks. Do we have another question?
Yeah, Reed has a question, Jenny.
Oh yeah.
Hi, Reed.
I was just wondering if you can do me a favor and go back to this. If you can pull up the slide with the pitch deck contents, the slide that shows the overview of all the topics that were discussed.
Sure.
I'd really appreciate that. Thanks so much.
Yeah. Is that the one? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I missed the first few too. Okay. Thanks so much. And that was my
yeah, no, absolutely. I know. If I can get this file to be small enough, I can send it out too.
That's fair.
Right. And Alexandro also has a hand up.
Yeah, so as you were mentioning earlier, like sometimes like you just don't market like the innovation like the right way. So how do you know what's a good indicator that tells you you're not marketing the right way, or to just like better cut your losses? Like, you know, it's just going to be a failed project that's not going to make it out there. Like, what's a good way? Like, what's something that you might feel like indicates like, oh yeah, this is going to go further?
I guess I'm not quite sure, but talking in general terms, I mean, if you're not getting traction, if people aren't buying it, you know, kind of like Proteus, like no one bought it. I mean, obviously that you're not solving the problem that you thought people had. So I think it goes back to going back out, testing your hypotheses with customers and pivoting and iterating on that. You know, if people aren't buying it, you need to figure out why. Are you solving a true problem or not?
No, just yeah. Oh, okay. I thought you were asking me if I was. Yeah.
No, you need to ask. Yes, you do need to ask yourself if you're solving a true problem or not. And then, you know, and then going one step further, is this a solution that's best for people, or do they have an alternative? Knowing the full market out there and the you know, competitive landscape.
Yeah, for sure.
But yeah, Nate, good. Lots of students have also used Reddit forums. Yep.
Okay, Jenny, before we turn it over to James,
Okay. Well,
you
I did
wanna
have, I know,
go to
I was
your-
like, let me go through
Go to
these
your
real quick.
resources. Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks.
So again, we went really fast over this. So feel free to reach out at any time. We're really here to help. Things to do though, if you're interested, join our community, our UCSF Startup Tree. It's where we post all of our opportunities and events. It's also, you know, you can connect with people. There is job postings from different startup companies there, and et cetera, et cetera. So we have our own events, and we also curate things that we think would be of interest to our community as well. So, you know, attend these events. Just a week or two ago, we did a fireside chat with Emily, the CEO and co-founder of Twist. It was really fun to hear her story of founding the company, growing it, where she's going next. So hearing these stories can be inspiring, but also just, you know, enlightening on how your journey could unfold as well. We as a UCSF Launchpad have different educational experiences every semester. So like I kind of briefly mentioned, as we just did a health tech startup week a few weeks back. And that's really, teams come to form, they kind of form together. You may come with an idea, you may not. And you get to go through this process of customer discovery and putting together a pitch deck. And it ends, and the whole event ends with a demo day of you showing off your work and doing your pitch. We have some prizes and stuff, but it's a really great experience. Whether you keep going forward with that idea or not, you really get the experience of what it takes. We also hold hackathons. There's a startup marketplace in partnership with Haas at Berkeley that they take UCSF and UC Berkeley IP and allow students to help work through the processes for them. So really good educational opportunities. Like I said, come talk to us. Happy to schedule an appointment at any point. We are also part of a larger Blackstone Launchpad network. It's a network of 46 schools across the US and in Ireland. And really, it's a great community of schools that, you know, we can get mentors from all over the place, and just we share opportunities and events and stuff like that. The one thing they do all together that we provide for all of our students is a speaker series every semester. We also offer the opportunity of a fellowship, which is an 8-week training program. It's different workshops and also mentor sessions. And if you go through this, you also get $5,000 to help you do, further your venture. So these are recent fellowship awardees that did come from UCSF. So you could see, medical student, resident, MTM student. So very exciting that they're all working on their ventures at the same time being at UCSF. Beyond that, if you're really getting some traction on your idea, we also offer bigger competitions with bigger non-dilutive prizes, monetary prizes. So, there's always great ways to get some money for your venture without having to give up equity at the beginning. Then I want to talk about beyond the Launchpad opportunities. Just in the Bay Area, we have some great ways to help you. The Bay Area NSF Corps is a Berkeley, UCSF, Stanford venture, and basically once a month, you can apply to be part of this program, and go through, again, this lean startup training. Lots of customer discovery interviews that you'll need to do during it, but you'll get help and feedback from the instructors there. Great experience. I've sat through that before. And if you go through that and you want to go on and do some more work in that nature, you can get some money by going through the National I-Corps program as well. UC Launch is a UC Berkeley-based accelerator program that we have close ties with. Rhonda Schrader over at Haas does a great job of this. We've had actually one of our teams, that for those of you that are working on Breathily, our current Catalyst awardee actually went through UC Launch before coming to Catalyst. So, we're all working together, and we're all here to try to help. Another one to take a look at is the Big Ideas Contest, really, early idea formation contests for any sort of social innovation, which usually healthcare falls into. Of course, there are things beyond even that, that, depending upon your current situation, but all I want to say is that I never expected the entrepreneurial community to be so welcoming and giving. And so I know that entrepreneurship can seem really foreign to a lot of students, a lot of, postdocs, but really reach out, because it really is kind of like this give first community where people are, there to help and cheer you on. It's not, I always thought it was going to be like, ooh, too competitive and my business idea is better than yours, but it's not. And so people are, the resources are out there if you want to proceed. So are there any other questions or comments?
Okay, hey, great. Hey, Jenny, that was really, really good. I like the way you broke it up into customer discovery, and then the business canvas, and then the pitch, and then all those other resources that have sort of a, like you said, they're more University of California focused, but there are a lot of different sort of activities people could get engaged in. So thank you very much. And so I'm going to turn it over now to James Huey. As I mentioned, he's a partner at Wilson Sonsini. Hi there, James. And so James, I'm hoping you can sort of introduce yourself and the career path that you've taken to get to where you are now. And then we turn it over to you for your presentation and any Q&A. And what will happen is that it's completely fine if someone wants to, put up their hand and interrupt you, or they're gonna type a question into the chat. And if they type a question into the chat, Nate will keep his eye on it and he'll break in and you can address the question. So
Okay.
Thank you very much, James, for joining us tonight.
And Charles, is most of the audience students that might be in various parts of their career, or are they?
Yeah, I think so. Like students or other trainees, like postdoctoral fellows and clinical residents and clinical fellows. And some students are at like San Francisco State and UC Berkeley.
Okay. Okay, that's good. But I might gear my presentation to a little less on the sausage making on startups or on corporations, and spend a little more time on career path.
Great, thank you, James.
I will say, I think we do have some, we do have some faculty, some PIs here too. I think that there's a wide variety. Some postdocs are, also working on projects, their PhD projects that they're trying to, potentially spin out. So there's a wide audience here.
Okay, good. I'll try to put a little for everything and not go too deep into nerd it out on some of the legal stuff. So about my background, I grew up in the South Bay, in Palo Alto, Cupertino, Los Altos, and that was like pre.com boom in the 90s. So it was quieter. My family, a lot of my family members on one side were working class, and then the other side were biochemists or pharmacists or researchers, either at UCSF, Harvard, in other areas. So I kind of had like this split of, on one side, very academic and doing research in the biotech field, and then on the working class side, like don't mess with me. We'll solve things in the back door, outside, and beat each other up, right? So grew up there, and then I went to Cal for undergrad. At Cal, I was studying molecular cell biology and biochemistry. Meanwhile, I was coding because in the .com boom, I was taking all these jobs as an engineer, and when it came, I was going down the road to become a doctor, or to take the MCATs, and I tried a little bit of medicine, I tried a little bit of research, and I found I didn't really want to do either. So in my junior year, at Cal, I decided to just on a whim go to law school because there's no prereqs. Somebody said, "Oh, sign up for the LSAT," and so I signed up, took the test, and decided to go to Santa Clara because there was a scholarship. So I went down to Santa Clara for law school, and for the last 16 years, I've been representing startup companies, mostly in the life science space, to help them get formed, funded, sell-side M&A or IPO. And it was, I really do value the choice that I made, because I'd say, when it comes to research, I like to understand a lot of the research, but for me to apply that deep, PhD level, that's probably not me. I mean, hard to say because I never went down that road. And then same thing with bioengineering. So like when I see people's devices or digital health companies, I say, oh, of course, it makes total sense. But me personally, I might not have really been able to figure that out myself. And so as a corporate attorney, I get to bring, like if you'd say this whole life science industry or startup industry is a potluck, I bring law. I bring corporate law to the potluck, and Jenny brings something else, and Charles brings something, and Nate. So we all bring something to the potluck, and what I bring, which I would say is not the main dish, but a good, good decent side dish. It's not chips, it's not napkins. I bring a pretty solid side dish to the potluck, and then that facilitates the startup companies to be able to raise money so that their corporate housekeeping is clean, and then they could raise money from the investors and then eventually go IPO or get acquired. So that's my background. I'm going to show some slides here. Okay, so Wilson Sonsini, growing up, that was the only law firm I knew. I didn't have any context because no lawyers were in my family. And I knew Wilson Sonsini because I'd drive down when I worked as a stock boy in a pharmacy. So I thought, oh, well, what's this place? Can I use your bathroom? On the way to the bus, and then I'd stop in Wilson City and use the bathroom. And that was the first firm that I knew. They've been around for a little over 50 years. And now we have offices in all these different areas that are really focused on technology or life sciences. And so I think the model is to represent the startup companies on emerging technology and then build them to, we might start out that first bottom circle where we're representing at the startup phase. And then later on, we'll take the companies public and then even grow them to the size of Apple or Google, or sell them to like LinkedIn to Microsoft. So those are some of our clients in the past. And of course we do medical device, biotech, digital health. Here you'll see that we represent a company in all these different types of industries. The way I think about it is that while it is hard to be an expert in all of these different industries, what I try to do is pick a few majors and minors. And so because of my bio background, I said, okay, I'm going to pick biotech. I'm going to pick medical devices.
Hey, excuse me. Are you meant to be sharing something right now?
Oh, all this time. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
It was on my screen, but I realized you're right. I don't have it up here. Let's see. Okay. Can you all see? Okay, thanks. All right. Are you guys is everyone seeing full screen or just partial screen?
Just partial.
Looks like
Yeah,
partial.
you'll need to put in presentation mode. There.
Great.
Great.
Okay, so Wilson Sonsini, offices around 3 circles where we start with the early stage, IPO stage, and then later on large company stage. What might happen oftentimes for a lot of life science companies and entrepreneurs is that I'll represent repeat entrepreneurs in this first circle. And then maybe when they go public or when they become commercial, oftentimes that they may not be the same individuals that really take that commercialization piece. So they might stop at that second circle and then come back and start 1 or 2 more companies. And then I'll help the entrepreneur through their next set of companies or their next rodeo. And after a few rodeos, they may say, James, I don't really want to be an entrepreneur anymore. I want to become a VC. And then I say, okay, well, let's figure out, who we can talk to and try to get you a position at a venture fund or some other type of consulting fund. So that's where we'll help out. Different industries. And here's where, thanks for pointing that out. I would have done the whole presentation without sharing my screen. But each of these different industries, I kind of think about them as different card games. So while as a corporate attorney, I might use the same 52 card deck. In other words, for corporate law, we have different tools for startup companies and their various financings and corporate governance. But these different industries will have different milestones, different KPIs, different trajectories. And so by representing a few of the industries, my goal is to be able to pull different strategies or different techniques to bring it to a different industry sometimes, and that could be helpful tools. So that's why I think about it. It's like, well, same deck of cards, but they're really different games. Like just as different as blackjack is different from Texas Hold'em or something. And you'd see a big cross section of various clients that we've represented. A lot of these are tech companies, but we're nowadays about 40% of the firm is based in life sciences. Okay, so forming the startup entity. One of the things, I think the main question might be, say, well, why do a corporation? Why follow those protocols? And that's what we'll talk about. At a high level, know that nowadays a lot of this is automated. So there's law firms that have, including our law firm, that automates the process to form the corporations. But then there's also ones like Clerky and LegalZoom. And what they've done, these different organizations, including ours, is to prevent a startup from going down the wrong direction and creating tax or liability issues. And so just off the top of your head, there's different forms. When you think about like the mom and pop shop, that's the liquor store or a restaurant, those are usually partnerships or sole proprietorships. But then you say, well, why do I want to use a corporation or an LLC? The first main reason is limiting the liability. So if I have, let's say, instead of opening the restaurant with myself and my brother, I form a corporation and then exercise corporate governance. Well, now let's say if somebody, drops their bowl of pho on themselves and has third degree burns. Well, they would try to sue, let's say my brother and I, but because we have a corporation, would say, well, we're just employees of this corporation. And so we're going to limit the liability. You could sue the corporation, but you can't sue us personally. So that shields liability for my personal assets. And sure, the person that got injured can sue the corporation, but not necessarily James Huey as the individual or my brother as the individual. You might hear LLC versus corporation. So now you say, okay, we need some entity to shield liability. And you might say, well, I've heard LLCs are good. You know, LLCs, they have a single pass-through and tax. You know, you can design it out how you'd like. But there is a reason why you don't really see LLCs used for a VC-backed startup. And the reason is that when it comes time for investment, most VCs, especially the early stage ones, need a tax blocker. So what happens is that a lot of these VCs, they have international investors or international LPs. They might come from China, they might come from Europe, they might have a sovereign wealth fund, they might have a rich individual from Africa. But the thing is that if you have a pass-through entity like an LLC, as the LLC increases in value, it could, the venture fund might have to do withholding based off of the gains and then the international treaty for that particular LP. So that just creates a big tax mess and it's expensive. And so one of the requirements of many of these early stage VCs is just to say, we don't invest in LLCs. We invest in Delaware C Corps. And this rule may not apply to venture funds that are, you know, $1 billion or more, or private equity funds that are managing $5 billion, $10 billion worth of money, because you could put a tax blocker in here. But just as a general matter for startup, you just think, okay, avoid the LLC. Let's not do the LLC. Let's just do a Delaware C Corp. And just know that there's different ways to fix an LLC. You know, you could talk to us, but basically we might say, maybe just start over. Or maybe we might say, no big deal, let's convert the LLC into a C Corp, and it might be a simple filing. So C Corp, okay, that's the way to go. The Delaware C Corp has become the de facto easy, press the button, you know, nice startup in a box type of approach. And the reason why it's gone that way, without telling too much of the sausage, but the reason is that there's clear corporate governance for Delaware corporations, and there's a natural court of chancery in Delaware that could preside on different disputes or Delaware law. And then because it's predictable, then it's easy for VCs and frankly, the lawyers that represent all these different parties to all understand the Delaware framework without having to look into California law, Nevada law, you know, all these other laws. So Delaware makes it easy. The C Corp, one of the things that you look at this last line and you say QSBS, what is that? That stands for Qualified Small Business Stock. And what happens is that if you buy shares of a Delaware C Corp that still is a qualified small business, in other words, when you start the company, if you hold the shares for more than 5 years, you can shield up to $10 million worth of gain federally. So the way that I like to think about it is, you start your company and it does well. You go through various rounds of financing. Eventually you sell your company and you get $12 million worth of gain. Well, 10 million of that, you you would normally have to pay in today, maybe 13% in California for long-term capital gains tax, and then 20% federally for long-term capital gains. And that might go up with if Biden's proposals go through. But if you held the shares for more than 5 years, instead of having to pay 20% of $10 million or $2 million, you get to keep that. And then, with $2 million saved, you can throw a nice party and, invite everyone on this call. And so that's one of the key things that's important for founders, but also for early stage investors. They really look at this QSBS treatment, and this QSBS treatment is unavailable for S corps and for LLCs. Okay, so I want to try to move quickly. So this slide shows how the relationship of these of a corporation is set up. You have shareholders on top, and they're the main focus in terms of when you think about what does the board of directors do. They report to the shareholders. They act for the benefit of the shareholders, and they have to exercise duties of care, duties of loyalty to the company and its shareholders. So that's why we have the shareholders on top. Then you see the board of directors, they pretty much control or grant stock options. So the optionees are the people that work for the company. They might be executives, they might be rank and file, whatnot. And then the CEO reports to the board. So the CEO, think about the CEO as the person that executes what the board tells the CEO to do. And then you have various levels of VPs that report to the CEO, and then the employees report to the VPs. Okay, let's see. Okay, I don't want to focus too much on S corps and C corps, but basically what you're trying to do is limit liability and have a structure that's investable, so that all of the points that Jenny brought up, you could focus on the meat of the company and the viability of the company, and not have to worry too much about the corporate structure. Again, nowadays, all of these documents, incorporation documents, are semi-automated. And so if you had a choice to use an automated process from a large law firm or clerky, you're probably better off going with that, because the forms are better than if you went to a small shop, and then the small shop is how startups would do their incorporations maybe 5+ years ago. And that's where you would have an associate that would prepare these documents and do data entry and fill in the name and do a control F and populate the documents. But now these are pretty much automated these days. Okay, so founder stock. The concept here is the founders receive a certain number of shares, but they're typically subject to vesting over time. And so I think the people in the audience are most likely familiar with stock options, where if you join Google, you get a stock option, and then that vests over 4 years. So as long as you continue to work for Google, you can buy more and more of those shares on an option. The founder stock is the reverse. So the founder stock, they receive all the shares up front, and they reverse vest over time, so that, let's say if you had a 4-year vesting and you stayed for 1 year, then you'd say 25% is vested. And if you left after that first year, then the company could repurchase the other 75% that's unvested. And what that does is that it provides incentive for all the founders to continue to work for the company and to continue to contribute and so on. Investors like this structure because they want to make sure that they don't put their money in and then right after they put their money in, the founders get up and leave, or a subset of the founders get up and leave because they say, oh, I'm fully vested. And so that's why they put it in place, basically to provide an incentive to all the other stakeholders, meaning the other founders, and then the investors, that the founders will continue to provide services to the company until they're well vested. Okay, so I guess I described a lot of this. One of the things that you may consider is the vesting provisions. So, you know, you could play around with saying, well, let's have it standard, let's vest over 4 years. Or you can say, well, as a founder, we kind of don't want to do all this work, get the investment, and there's a chance we may get terminated. You know, the investors come in and they say, well, we like A, B, and C founder, but D founder, what does he do? Or what does she do? We should get rid of that. So that's one of the reasons why to think about the vesting provisions, and maybe you have a vest over 3 years instead of 4 years. Or maybe you have it so that 25% invested is up front and the rest vest over 3 years, so that by the time you raise your institutional round, maybe you're close to being half vested. So that's something to consider. And then there's a term called single trigger and double trigger acceleration. That might be thrown around. So the metaphor for these triggers is like a rifle. And when you pull when it accelerates, the shares vest, or like a bullet, it accelerates and then becomes fully vested. So going with this metaphor, the single trigger acceleration is the rifle. And then on a change of control, one pull of the trigger, once the company gets acquired, 100% of the shares accelerates. That's the metaphor, single trigger acceleration. For double trigger acceleration, it's two pulls of the trigger. Pull number one is company gets acquired. Pull number two is the founder or the executive is terminated without cause. And so if both those triggers are pulled, then 100% gets accelerated. And so, you know, people and law firms and investors will all kind of say single trigger is totally acceptable for biotech companies. Other ones will say that's not the industry standard. Double trigger is industry standard. You know, the funny thing is that I've been on both sides of the table, and then I've also negotiated with law firms, the same lawyer on this subject, and they'll literally talk out both sides of their mouth. Right? They'll say single trigger is totally acceptable, totally normal, and then when they're on the investor side, say no way that single triggers. And I'll find the email and like, oh hey, you know, I found your email. You didn't say that.
James, is it because you have the double trigger because if the company gets purchased by another company, they want the founders to stay with it and keep building the technology rather than cutting it, rather than leaving. Is that the idea?
That's right, and that's heading to the right direction. And then you might say, So who really cares about it? It comes down to the investors care about it. Because here's the hypothetical. Company starts, they raise money, and then they sell for $100 million to the acquirer. Well, if you have single trigger acceleration, all the key personnel get accelerated, and then they say, well, what are you going to do next? Then they'll say, well, I'm fully accelerated, so microphone drop, I'm out. Unless you decide to really incentivize me and give me a package and the team a package of $10 million to keep us on and work through the transition period and incentivize us. So now the acquirer says, okay, if we were going to give you 100 million, we're thinking, the acquirer is just thinking the total purchase price. So they say, instead of giving 100 million to everybody, let's just say 90 million to everybody, and then the other 10 million now is for 90 million, or yeah, the additional 10 million is for to keep people on the transition stage. So that 10 million that got taken away from the company pretty much came out of the investor's pocket. But if we have double trigger acceleration, now it shifts the leverage over to the investors and takes it away from the founders, because now when the company gets acquired for the 100 million, the key personnel say, well, you better pay me more, or otherwise I'm going to microphone drop. And then they say, well, you're not really fully vested yet, right? You're only going to be, you still have to stick around for another 6 months or another year, because you're technically not fully vested yet. And sorry to break it to you, but in order to be fully vested, you need the 2 triggers of the rifle to then fully accelerate. So don't be, thinking you have so much leverage, key personnel. You have double trigger acceleration. So now, instead of negotiating the $10 million transition package, it's maybe looking more like 3 million or 4 million, to keep the key personnel along for another 6 months or 1 year. They don't have as much leverage. And so that's why the investors really care about the double trigger versus the single trigger, because it takes away the leverage at that time of acquisition. How's our time? We got about 10 minutes. Okay, one of the key things, everybody is going to, so employee documents and invention assignment agreements, consulting agreements, what you want to do. Okay, well, before we go on, don't miss your 83B elections. So what happens is, with the reverse vesting, you have to file an 83B election with the IRS within 30 days of getting that founder stock. And this is one of the holes where, the robot has a little bit of a hole, because now everything is automated. And the last part that is actually not automated is filing this handwritten 83B election with the IRS within 30 days. So this has always been a big issue, but I think now that, because everyone is relying on document automation, I've been seeing more and more unfiled 83B elections, because everyone just relies on it and says, I pressed the button on the robot, and then I didn't know you were supposed to file an 83B election. Like, nobody told me, or it didn't have a flashing thing to warn me. So I know my slides aren't pretty, but it's in red. So remember that part. File the 83B elections. And there's ways to fix it, but it can be costly. Hey, John, what's up?
Hi, thanks, James, so much for doing this. I used to work at a startup with 4 people, and I got shares, and my direct boss was the CEO, and I asked the CEO, that I want to file an 83B election, but he told me that it was like too hard or too complicated, and I was just an entry-level job, and he told me that the lawyers, it would be too much for them. Is this true or not really true? Because from what I understand, the 83B election needs both the employer and the employee. Am I mistaken, or is this?
You're correct that you should be filing an 83B election.
Yeah, I told him that.
Even irrespective of what the management says, right? And this is where you bring it up to your tax advisor and say, hey, I'm buying stock in this startup company. Can you help me file the 83B election? Once you filed it once, it's really easy, and your tax advisor can file it like right away. But rewinding back to the first .com boom in the late 80s, what happened was a whole bunch of people didn't file their 83B elections, and then they went public within a short amount of time. And then people were stuck with $2 or $3 million tax bills that they had to pay to the IRS, but they had illiquid stock. So they couldn't even sell their stock. And then they had to pay these humongous tax bills. And that's all the way in the 80s. So think about it now, adjusted for inflation, right? And so now that, that the industry is developed, there's all these tax advisors, there's attorneys, there's all these service providers. There should be, they'll all tell you, file that 83B election. And there's, even if one person says, don't worry about it, don't listen to them. You should worry about it. You should file it on time. Let's say you miss it. You can't, there are ways to accelerate it or subject to, there's different ways to fix it, but it could be, by the time you fix it, it'll be a taxable event between the value of the shares and then the original purchase price. And you might have to pay taxes on $15,000 or $100,000 worth of gain. So yeah, better just to do it and talk to your accountant or your tax advisor. They should be able to help you file it.
I see. So the 83B election is something you file with your tax attorney, not an agreement that you set up with the company.
Yeah, a lot of the law firms representing the companies don't like to help with this anymore, just because it's tedious, it's expensive. That's where your CEO is probably coming from. It's like, oh, this is a pain in the butt. That to help the employees file it almost costs more money than preparing the document.
Oh, I see.
Right?
I see what's going on. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, in the old days, sure, someone had to go in and fill it in, but now that somebody presses the button and it spits out all these documents, now they say, okay, all the RSPA holders, it's up to you to file those 83B elections, because there's no robot to prepare the 83B for you and mail it to the IRS. So that's the challenge there. Charles, do I have 5 minutes?
Sure, James. Yeah, you got 5 minutes, buddy. Sure. Yes.
Okay. So you receive stock options. One of the key things is that stock options need to be granted at the fair market value at the time of the grant. And so if you're working for a startup and you receive a stock option, or you enter into agreement to for options, you want to make sure you get those options sooner than later, because right now, let's say when you first start the company or early in the company, the value of the options are really low. But as the company raises more money, the value will go up, and the company's supposed to get a 409A valuation to determine the fair market value of the common stock. Okay, let's see. Okay, so financings happen very quickly these days. You could start a company and then raise some money from friends and family or institutional angels, especially through the UCSF network. There's a lot of investors that are interested in UCSF companies. But talk with the various advisors, they all can help and whatnot. So I think from here, since I got 4 minutes, I'll open up to questions. Maybe I can answer one or two.
James, I had a question on timing in general. I get this question a lot from our Catalyst PIs, wondering when they should incorporate. And, a lot of them might want to incorporate to get some funding, but aren't ready to give up, ownership yet to outside CEO that they're potentially bringing in later. How does the timing work?
Yeah, so some of the considerations to form the company earlier is you want to have at least 3 weeks or so before the company raises money and when you do the founder stock. Because when you start the company, the stock is worthless from a tax perspective, or 0.0001 cents a share. And then you say, oh, well, we're working on the license out of UCSF and the regents, or we put together the team. And so now you're talking outside of your other side of your mouth and saying, well, the company's really valuable. And so the thing is, it's like, well, what happened in this 2 to 3 week or 5 week period? And so you have to justify when the company went from worthless to valuable in that amount of time. So that's one reason to start it earlier. Another reason is if you have a number of people that are working for the company and they're not associated with the university. So sometimes you might say somebody's working for the university and other people are contributing to the IP. The problem is to say, well, who owns the IP, right? If it's all happening in the university, then that makes it easy because the university owns the IP. But if it's a group of people that are developing the IP and looking to file patents, then if people don't sign a consulting agreement or at-will employment agreement that assigns the IP to the company, then the answer is all of those people have equal access to the IP. So that means founder A that hasn't signed anything can go to Medtronic and license it. Founder B can do a startup company. Founder C can do their own startup company, and founder D can sell whatever partial rights to Smith & Nephew, right? So that might be the reason to start the company earlier when we say, okay, we're about to file some patents and we're going to be named inventors, but we really want not all 4 of us or 3 of us to have equal access to the IP. We want to put it into a company so that then we can fundraise on this company and build this dream, as opposed to one person defects. And now if somebody else has access to the IP and they're looking to do something with it, you might not have a company because in the future, because they'd say, oh, well, it looks like the competitor already has a license to this key IP. So that'd be a reason to start it earlier than later. One other thing too is because with UCSF, there is this startup in a box program. Not just us, but other law firms, they also can oftentimes provide free incorporation services. So just talk to Charles and Nate, let's say if you wanted to start your corporation, and we can, Wilson Sonsini can form the corporation for free, not charge any legal costs, and there'd be still outside filing fees with Delaware and the registered agent. but that's another one of the benefits of being part of the UCSF network.
Great,
Oh, good.
great resource.
So that's another reason to maybe form the corporation a little earlier, because it's not very costly. The legal fees are free rather than $5,000 or $3,000 or something. All right. Well, nice chatting with everybody. Feel free to reach out anytime. Happy to chat, and I bounce back and forth between Palo Alto and San Francisco and virtual and stuff. So good chatting with everyone.
Hey, James, thank you very much for that presentation. Couple of those things I was familiar with, but it's interesting that there's a lot of other stuff, especially in response to that question of John about that 80B, whatever it was he asked you about. I'm going, what the heck is that? So yeah, a lot of information, and we really appreciate your time. And then that tip at the end that people can come to Wilson Sonsini and take advantage of free incorporation is fantastic. And you kind of made it clear that you and your partners like to start off helping companies, and then you're hoping to ride with them all the way to unicorn status or IPO or further glory. Yeah. So you set your hooks early, and you hope that the clients like your services and stick with you as they grow themselves.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I like it when they're homegrown, because I know everything is clean, and I think the investors recognize that too. They say, oh, if you started with Wilson Sonsini or a legitimate firm, then the cleanup is not too expensive. Mm-hmm. Contrast that when I get a company out of Philly or another jurisdiction, the cleanup is sometimes more costly than the financing. And then they say, oh my goodness, why is it so expensive? It's like, because it's harder to undo something than just get it done right from the beginning.
Great point. And why don't we end on that point? And we want to all thank James and Jenny for very interesting talks and answers to the questions. And so I finally wanted to thank everybody that dialed in today, and feel free to contact any of us with respect to how your target product profiles are going, any questions, etc. So thank you all for dialing in, and we'll see you all again. We'll see you all again in September, but we'll see some of you before then. So thank you very much.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.